Moving on, let's look at some more interesting features of JavaScript object properties. In example 17, we'll see that it's possible to add properties to objects dynamically. That means once you've created an object with a certain set of properties, on the fly you can add new properties and assign new values to those properties on an object. This is not possible in Java, C++, or any other conventional object-oriented language. However, it's one of the mind-bending things that JavaScript objects allow. Once an object is set up, on the fly you can add properties to it dynamically. Let's see how. A brief recap before we dive into this example. We know that an object is a set of key value pairs where values can also be functions. They don't have to be strings in numbers alone, they can also be functions. This is by far the best way to describe a JavaScript object, and it's very different way of thinking about objects than compared to C++ or Java or even Python for that matter. A set of key value pairs where values can also be functions. Each key value pair in an object is called a property of the object. We've used this term before and we are going to be using it here on in very often as well. A key value pair is called a property. The term property is extremely important. We'll be using it over and over again. It refers to the key value pair which belongs to an object. With this in mind, let's see how we can add properties to an object on the fly. In JavaScript, not only can you add properties on the fly, but you can also remove properties from an object once the object has been created. We'll look at both. First, in example 17, we'll talk about adding properties. So let's set up a constructor for an object with 3 properties. This is the same constructor that we worked with earlier, that of a rectangle, so it should be very familiar to you. Here it is on screen, function rectangle, and within the rectangle we use the this keyword to refer to the object that this object constructor is going to create. This has 3 properties: this.length, this.breadth, and this.color, which is assigned its values from the arguments of the function. The properties of the object created by this object constructor are length, breadth, and color, as you can see on screen right there. The way we create an object using this constructor is also familiar to us. We simply use the keyword new. So we say new rectangle and pass in the arguments we want to use to create this object and assign this object to the variable named rectangle, just like you can see on screen. So remember, rectangle has 3 properties: length, breadth, and color, and we've now assigned an object rectangle to the rectangle variable. This is our setup. What if we now write a JavaScript statement which accesses a non-existent property called outline color? This is a property we haven't defined in the object constructor. What if we try to access a non-existent property called outline color? Look at the part highlighted on screen, rectangle.outline color. This property has not been defined, it does not exist, and we try to access it. It's non-existent. What do you think will happen? Just a thing to note, the only properties which are valid and defined for this object so far are length, breadth, and color. Outline color is not one amongst these defined properties. Outline color does not exist. This ought to remind you of something we've seen before, trying to access something that is non-existent. JavaScript is quirky in that if you try to access anything that has a non-existent value, it returns the special value undefined. JavaScript has a special undefined value to represent something which does not exist. So the output of this console.log statement will look like what you see on screen. It will say our rectangle has outline color equal to undefined, indicating that rectangle.outline color does not exist. Now, the interesting thing about JavaScript is that you can add this property outline color to this rectangle object which you've created on the fly after the object constructor has been called. So the object constructor has been called. You've set up 3 properties, but outline property does not exist yet. You can add this outline property to the object after it has been constructed. Let's look at how we would dynamically add the outline color property to this rectangle object. There are 2 ways of doing this. We'll first look at syntax 1. Here, note how it looks on screen. This is how we add the outline color property on the fly to an object which has already been created using an object constructor. Rectangle, open square brackets, in quotes outline color is equal to black. Pay close attention to this syntax. It might seem strange when seen for the very first time. We first specify the name of the object to which you want to add this property. Rectangle is the name of the variable which holds this object, which means it's the name of the object, and we want to add the outline color property to this object, which is why the name of the object is specified first. Specify the name of the property that you want to add to this object in square brackets. Outline color is the name of the property that you want to add to the rectangle object. It's specified in square brackets, just like you can see on screen. Note the square brackets that surround the property name. So use the square brackets and place the property name inside the square brackets. And then after the equal to sign comes the value of the property for this particular object. So the value of the outline color property you want to be black. So specify the value of the property. And that's it. Once you've defined the property in this way, you can go ahead and use the property now just as though it had been defined in the object constructor. The property now exists. It's a part of the rectangle object and you can use it just like any regular property. We labeled this manner of adding a property on the fly as syntax 1. So what you just saw was syntax 1. There also exists another way you can add a property on the fly. That is syntax 2. Let's go ahead and take a look at syntax 2 right now. You'll simply say rectangle dot outline color is equal to black. The dot notation is how you access properties of an object. You'll simply access the outline color property and give it and assign it a value. In this case, it's black. These two syntax forms are exact equivalents. Using the square brackets with the outline color in quotes is equivalent to calling it in this manner. Rectangle.outline color is equal to black. There is, however, one advantage to syntax 1 over syntax 2. There is an advantage to using the square bracket notation which we saw earlier. And the reason for that is using syntax 1 allows you to specify the name of the property in a variable. So you could set up a variable called property name, give it a value outline color, which is the name of your property, and then say rectangle square brackets property name is equal to black. That's exactly the same as rectangle square brackets in quotes outline color is equal to black. So essentially, you'd be able to specify your property name as a variable. You can even take this variable as an input from the user. So you could have the user specify what property name he wanted and add that property name to an object. You can't do this with syntax 2. Once we define the property, either using syntax 1 or syntax 2, we can go ahead and use the property. Let's see this in action and make sure that it really works. There's nothing like looking at a few lines of code to prove what we've learned. Take a look. We first log the rectangle.outline color before we define it. Then we go ahead and add this property on the fly to the object rectangle and then log it again. And if you look at the output, you'll see that the first time we print undefined and later it'll have the color black as the outline color. So the first log is actually undefined. The first console.log for the rectangle.outline color property shows undefined on screen. That's because that property does not exist yet. This is correct, it's valid. We add this property on the fly. So we say rectangle square brackets outline color is equal to black. And then we try logging again. Now outline color is a valid property of the rectangle object. And this is proven when we call console.log again and access rectangle.outline color. It says it has the outline color black. It works. We've added a property on the fly successfully.